You know what I'm really, really fucking tired of? I'm just really tired of logging onto Twitter every day, period. But also, I'm also tired of logging onto Twitter every day, and I see people that still spew this bullshit about saying that Persona 5 Royal can't run on Switch, and more accurately, when it does release, it'll run like ass on Switch. Let's just say this right now. I don't think that's fucking true at all. And today, I'm going to prove that. I got some points to make about that, about how P5R on Switch, you won't have to worry about a thing, it's going to be fine. Sit back, relax, let's get it on. Today, I have my friend Kuro for the Midnight Channel joining me. How you doing today, Kuro?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, of course, man. I know that you're not a huge fan of the Switch, but I also know that a lot of people have been talking about this, about P5R on Switch and everything, and I kind of just wanted to clear the air, and I wanted to get someone who is not that big of a fan of the Switch on here, and so thank you so much for joining me today. So, we've seen a lot of people say that P5R can't run on Switch and everything, it's too big of a game. I mean, at its core, I still think it's still an enhanced PS3 game. People forget that the original Persona 5 came out on the PS3 back in the day when it launched on PS3 and PS4. And even with the Switch's dated architecture, it can still run PS3 games. What do you think about that, Kuro? Do you feel like P5R even is still like an enhanced PS3 game?
Yeah, it is. 100% it is. I remember, I think FAS was doing a mod to add all the content from Persona 5 Royal onto Persona 5 for the PS3 version of it. So It's definitely still the same game. That itself tells you that it is still the same game. As far as length, I think people confuse length of a game with like the weight of a game, like how much because a game can be long without necessarily mean that it's using a lot of data and everything, and that's a completely different subject. But it's a lot of people think, the game is 100 hours long, like it's just too long. That has nothing to do with the game being able to run or not. That's not how game development works. And I've definitely played some games that are really long on the Switch that played just fine, so I don't think that's really a big deal at all.
I think one of those games that we can agree on, The Witcher 3 is on the Switch, and that's a
100%.
That's a very long game.
Yeah, that's actually the game that I was referring to. That game is easily over 100 hours long. It's a big RPG, and from a graphical standpoint, it may be one of the best looking games on the Switch, which is, if you look at the Persona game, Persona 5 is a great looking game, but it's not graphically impressive. Like, if you look at it from a graphical perspective, it's not really winning any awards in that category or anything like that.
All right, it's a very stylized game and everything, but then you have games like Doom Eternal, which is this gen base. It's a PS4 game at heart. And even Nier Automata, recently they're releasing that this coming week on Switch, and it seems to be running just fine. The reviews point to it being a very steady 30 FPS experience. Obviously, they've had to downgrade the graphics, but it seems to be fine.
Yeah.
And Catherine Full Body even has the exact same engine. Now, I know the P5R engine, P5 engine are kind of different. They beefed up the engine for P5R. But Catherine Full Body has the exact same engine as P5R, and I don't know if you played it on Switch, but it ran great for me.
Yeah, I played I played a bit of it. So yeah, I have it on Switch actually. That's one of the very few games that I do own on Switch. And even let's not even go that far. Recently, Shin Megami Tensei 5 came out on Switch. And I know you and I both played the game to its full, length and everything. And say whatever you say about that game, but that game had definitely a lot more busy things going on because it was an open world game. And that game, despite some of the limitations on the Switch, it still ran pretty good for me.
Right. It wasn't perfect by any means for its performance, but it still ran very, very well, in my opinion. A few hitches here and there, especially when first loading up the game. But other than that, it ran pretty good for me. But, like you said earlier, length doesn't really define a video game, and so doesn't file size. So I've seen some people speak on that. Can you speak on like all these conversations about the file size of the game affecting the Switch version, how it's going to run?
Yeah, of course. So one of the things to consider is the Switch has been out now for almost 6 years. So a lot of the developers have been really smart as far as like being able to compress games from, let's say, the PS4 or other versions into running really well on the Switch. For example, back on the PlayStation 4, Persona 5 was running like 39 gigabytes, but now it's like 14.2 gigabytes on Switch. That's really impressive. Like, you think about everything out of the window, that itself, that they're able to take that game and just make it in way smaller sizes is really impressive from like a developer perspective. But at the same time, it's not unheard of, because I think a lot of people look at that and like, oh, they're taking out things. Guys, on the PlayStation 5, all file sizes are actually smaller on PS5 than on PS4. And it's because every engine works a little bit different. PS5 works different from PS4, and Switch works different from the Switch. So like all of those are gonna run different. It's always gonna have different file sizes. So looking at the file size, I wouldn't like get scared or anything. It definitely compressed things. You know, they already confirmed that it's gonna run on 720p instead of 1080p, which is totally fine because the Switch screen doesn't go to 1080p anyway. And the whole thing, I feel like most of the people that wanted to play the game on the Switch was because of the portability aspect. So nobody's ever gonna be like, oh man, I really wanted to get this on 1080p. The game has been out for like 4 or 5 years on PS4 now. So like, in that regard, really, is there any reasons to complain about that? I don't think so, because if you wanted to play it on 1080p, you would already done it by then. So in my end, I feel like it's fine. Of course, we're probably gonna see things like compressing on textures and models, you know, to save space and everything. That's totally fine. Again, I think it's very valid on the size that they are making the game portably. So of course there are some sacrifices are gonna be, but looking at all the screenshots and all the video footage that we've seen, it doesn't look like that much of a downgrade. I know we've both seen the footage, and I don't know if you're gonna play it here through the video, but none of it looks like it's really that bad of a change.
Right. We've seen some off-screen footage from Tokyo Game Show recently.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that much. I'm sure that there's more footage out there, but I think you know the exact video that I'm talking about. The game seemed to be running smooth. I mean, probably you're not going to be getting 60 FPS. I think that's pretty much been confirmed with the trailers as well. But, I mean, it'll probably run the exact same way as the PS4 version. Will it be perfect? I mean, there's so many factors that go into video game developing. I'm sure there's going to be a few hitches here and there. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it's going to be perfectly suitable, which kind of goes into my last kind of point that I want to mention, is that, guys, people have been asking for P5R on Switch for a long time. It's highly requested. If you look online and everything, if you're a part of the Atlus community at all, or even don't follow Atlus, people have wanted this game on Switch for a long time. Atlus is not going to fuck this up, I feel like. They can't fuck this up, because, I mean, they have to have it run well. People are going to buy this game with the expectation of it running well. The game's going to be running natively on Switch. It's not going to be a cloud game like Kingdom Hearts or anything. It's not going to be a botched port like WWE 2K18 or anything like that on the Switch. Atlus is going to make sure that this runs well because they want to satisfy everybody. Do you think I'm on base with that, Kuro? I mean, they can't really mess this up because there's such a big expectation.
I think what people need to think about it this way. Persona 5 is their cash cow. They cannot mess it. There's many other things that they mess up, but this release is just something that cannot be really, like, if it messes up, this will really ruin plans for Atlus for future releases and everything. Obviously, we all know there's a lot more things going on. Like the Persona 3 and Persona 4 and everything. This is really like their entry point to all that. So if this messes up, this is really gonna mess things up for the future. So I think Atlus really wants to hit this home run, like completely. They need this to be a good release, and they need this to be as good as possible for the future of the company and everything. So I don't think they will release this one in a bad state if it wasn't. And I honestly feel like we would have already heard things. Because if one thing about Japanese consumers is, even though they don't really talk shit sometimes, They will when it comes to things like that. And they had the demo running at TGS, like we were talking about earlier. So I feel like if there was any jarring issues, people would have already mentioned it when the demo was out there on TGS.
Right.
Because people had hands-on, right? I don't know if people have seen screenshots of that, but there are people actually being able to go there and like play the games and everything.
So I think if anything, don't doubt Persona 5 Royal on Switch. It's going to be just fine. Don't believe the hype of the few people that say, oh, it's not going to run great because it's too powerful for the system. Kuro, I want to thank you for coming on today. I always appreciate it. It's always a good time with you, man. And I hope you're looking forward to Persona 5 Royal on Switch as much as I am, even though you're not that much of a Switch fan. It's going to be a big release.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming here.
Of course, man. And we'll see you guys on the next video. King out.